Well, religious freedom is something which many of us in Canada take for granted. Under Prime Minister Harper, an Office for Religious Freedom was established, and Dr. Andrew Bennett was Canada's ambassador for religious freedom. That role was abolished with the Trudeau government, but here is Dr. Andrew Bennett to talk to us about religious freedom. Welcome.
Thank you, Lorna.
To 100 Huntley Street. Okay. It shocked me when Mr. Trudeau's government wiped out religious freedom as an ambassador's role. How did you react to that? You were holding the post of ambassador of religious freedom in Canada.
That's correct. Well, I thought it was certainly short-sighted. I think when we look at what's happening overseas, and I think it's important to remind people that the role that I had was within our foreign policy. So I was speaking about religious freedom overseas as part of Canada's principled foreign policy, grounded very much in our approach to human rights overseas. So I think it was a misguided move by the government.
I wondered when they knocked out that role if our government didn't realize how very religious other countries are. Canada's extremely secular when you put us in a global landscape, is it not?
Well, I think it's important to say that we have a secular state in Canada, and I think that's important in the sense that the government is not affiliated with any particular religion. But in Canada, we don't have a secular society. We have a society that is a broad patchwork of many different faith communities. 70% of Canadians continue to profess a particular religious faith. And so yes, in Canada, in the public discourse, faith is not as dominant. But when we go overseas, the vast majority of countries in the world, as you said, are very religious. People in those countries are very religious. And if you look at the most recent data, roughly 84% of the world's population, according to the Pew Foundation, 84% of the world's population is religious. So not to be able to engage with that perspective overseas, not to be able to talk about faith and the role that faith plays in people's lives, you develop a very serious diplomatic blind spot, as I've said on a number of occasions. So I think when we're engaging overseas as diplomats, as the Canadian government, it's important to understand the role that faith plays, not simply in a perceived cultural discourse, but also in people's lives in terms of society, economics, politics.
It's massively, it's shaping the globe.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, thankfully, we have a wonderful Christian think tank in Canada called Cardus. I've worked with it for well over a decade. We work in and out of it very closely at Context. And they have now appointed you the Religious Freedom Portfolio. And describe a little bit what you hope to do with religious freedom issues in Canada under Cardus.
Well, we now have just recently launched Cardus Law. And so Cardus Law is a program area for us. And under Cardus Law, we're looking at the role that law plays in terms of our ordered society and how does society flourish within Canada. Now, a lot of our focus within that area of expertise, that area of focus, Cardus Law, will be on religious freedom. Will be on religious freedom as a fundamental freedom here in Canada.
So give me an example of where we might be slipping on religious freedom in Canada.
I think there are a number of areas, certainly in the area of healthcare.
I was just going to say.
So the conscience rights of physicians, the conscience rights of nurses, of hospital chaplains, in the areas of euthanasia.
In 7 months, we've had 800 deaths through the new assisted dying law. This is euthanasia deaths. And doctors and healthcare places are finding, whoa, we do not want to participate in this. And we should not take it for granted that they have a right to say, I'm not going to get involved in your suicide.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially when you look at faith-based institutions, whether it's St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto, Catholic Hospital, Mount Sinai, St. Joseph's, not too far from where we are here in Burlington. These are hospitals that are firmly grounded in a faith tradition that rejects, assisted suicide and killing, murder. And so I think, it's important to recognize that not only do individuals possess the freedom of religion, because human rights are about, individual human rights, but also how do we understand individuals living within a community, such as the church? And how do those institutions that are connected with that community sort of bear those rights, the right to religious freedom? So doesn't a Catholic hospital have the right to say, because of our faith, we will not perform these types of services, as they're referred to?
So how do we go about properly protecting religious rights in Canada for the institution, for the individual. I mean, we saw it happen under education as well. We saw parents saying to Ontario's sex ed curriculum, that's not what I want in my teaching. How do you protect your religious rights as a parent?
I think that's a many-faceted question, and it requires a somewhat complex answer. But I think, first of all, we have to recognize that the Supreme Court of Canada consistently has upheld that religious freedom is a fundamental freedom in this country. And there have been a number of rulings recently on questions of religious freedom where the Supreme Court has sought to find a balance. Now, I think it's important for us as Canadians, and particularly us as Christians and other people of faith, to continually speak into the public square about religious freedom, to say that people of faith make up this society of ours. As I said, 70% of Canadians profess a particular religious faith. So it's important for people of faith to be in the public square, to speak openly about their faith, to engage our institutions as people of faith without fear, with a confidence that says, here's what I believe. And I believe that these particular directions that are being taken in public policy, whether it's in the area of education, whether it's in the area of healthcare, I believe these to be wrong. Not wrong just for me as a Christian, but for our society.
You know, Andrew, I have been taking notes from Canada's First Nations peoples because they cannot separate their spiritual identity as being rooted in the Creator. And so wherever they show up at the table of Canadian life, they bring their spiritual identity. They bring their ceremony. Is that part of what we do in Canada? Like, is that, am I wrong in thinking our First Nations peoples are leading the way in saying, don't divide me from this?
And not only our First Nations peoples, but also many other faith traditions who are very open and public about their faith. Think of, the Sikh community.
Yeah. It's on your head, touched by God.
Absolutely.
That's what the turban means, touched
Absolutely.
by God.
And so you are very openly religious, also in the Muslim community. I think for a long time, Christians, we have bought into a particular myth that emerged out of the Enlightenment in the 18th century, early 19th century, that religion is a purely private matter. It's what I do at home. It's what I do in the comfortable pew. It's not what I speak about publicly. And that is not historically accurate when you look at the history of the church.
Yeah.
And it's not theologically accurate. It's not reflective of our baptism. Our baptism calls us to engage the world.
Wow.
And so we have to, I think, as Christians, particularly given our historic roots here in this country, given the fact that Christians are still, the largest faith community in this country, I think we need to take a particular leadership role in this, in engaging and opening up the public square again to faith. Because if not, if voices of faith are not present there, then our public debate will be significantly diminished. And we can look to fellow Canadians of the Sikh faith or the Orthodox Jewish faith and learn from them.
I want to close with this. Why does this matter so much to you personally? I've watched you as, when you were the diplomat in Ottawa, and I thought, wow, you really, you've not shied away at all from saying, I need to bring who I am, my identity, as you are. I would describe you as you're an Orthodox Christian, and I loved watching you in multi-faith settings where you describe, this is what I believe. It's not the same as what you believe as a religion, but together we are together. Why? How come your relationship with God has caught you the way it has?
I think because of my unflinching conviction and belief in the incarnation. Either we believe that God became man, or we don't. And if we accept the incarnation as true, then that demands a lot of us as Christians. It demands that we recognize in every other person that we encounter that image and likeness of God. And if we do that, if that's our touchstone, then that demands that we must be champions for human dignity. And religious freedom speaks profoundly to human dignity. The freedom to contemplate, who am I? Who am I in relationship to you? Who am I in relationship to creation? Who am I in relationship to God? And that's what drives me. And I'm very blessed that I've been given a strong faith, a faith that at times is weak, as with all of us, but blessed be God, I hope that it continues to strengthen, and this work certainly helps me. This is part of my vocation now.
Andrew Bennett, thank you. Dr. Andrew Bennett with Cardus, and Cardus has so many different divisions, but you lead it in religious freedom and in law and in celebrating Canada's 150th anniversary. You're among friends. This is an audience which really understands, Andrew, that there must be a protection of the religious voice in Canada and what it brings to our country. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorna. I would ask your viewers to pray for us and to pray for me in my work.
Thank you, Andrew Bennett.